Hello, my name is BRETT REX BRUTON, and I am about to read you an excerpt from my short story, The Blip, available now on Amazon Kindle. Dirk flailed at the slippery, tubular beast that had attached itself to the soft flesh of his armpit. Still groggy from his stint of unconsciousness, he slipped his hold on the supply closet shelf and sank into the icy water. The world went darker. He kicked and banged about the tiny room. His head caught the corner of something invisible, and he briefly saw stars. His foot went deep into a tangle of rods and drifting line, and when the thick lure snagged in his calf, a storm of bubbles boiled from his mouth. He grabbed the eely parasite with his right hand, but it slipped his grip. His lungs were beginning to burn. He struck up for the surface, tugging at the water with his hands as his thick orange slicker tried to drag him back down. His face broke free of the water, and he sucked in a lungful of air and brine. Coughing and spitting, he grabbed the edge of a shelf. The creature had begun to thrash wildly, and his armpit had gone numb. He dug his fingers into its tough, slippery hide. He squeezed hard and yanked. There was a sickening tug and a wet pop. Then his inner arm and side went warm as his slicker filled with blood. Dirk pulled the monster free. In the dark, its body glowed a thin phosphorus blue as it whipped around in his grip. He threw it as best he could. It thwacked into the cabin wall barely a meter away, fell into the water and, with a twist of its meaty tail, vanished. Dirk panted heavily, darting his head from side to side, searching for the parasite's return. But, as the minutes passed, he felt his heart rate begin to slow. The dull red glow of the emergency light cast heavy shadows across the air bubble, where he struggled for breath, and the dark water hid all but the brightest reflections. He stuck his hand beneath his rain jacket and felt for the wound. A pulpy, warm mound about the size of a cigar burn smarted at his touch. Lifting himself further out of the water, he checked his fingers for blood, but beneath the emergency red light, it was impossible to tell. The shock of his sudden awakening was quickly turning to terror. He was alive, but he was trapped. How far down, he had no way of knowing. He twisted himself around and squinted into the red-black room. The small cabin was a little over 2 meters squared and about as high. Dirk clung to the second shelf from the top. Bottom? The water level sat just below his chin, its surface littered with bobbing debris. Wellingtons, buckets, gloves, buoyant key rings, and tangles of fish gut bumped and rocked against each other as the wreck swayed in the current, while the floor, ceiling, was a death trap of gutting knives, tuna hooks, chocker barbs, and gaffs. A small porthole was set halfway down the wall, normally allowing a view from the ship's aft, just above the waterline. Now it was black and blind. Dirk twisted himself towards the small cabin doorway and immediately cried out as the fishing lure hooked into his calf tugged sharply at the tender muscle. He cursed, then, still clinging to the shelf with his left hand, reached down with the other to prod the flesh around the wound. The hook wasn't in too deep, a centimeter, 2 at the most, but the barb was fixed in tight. "Fuck," he said. Well, this wouldn't be the first time, and, with God's help, this wouldn't be the last. There wasn't any other way. He reached for the knife on his belt, a piece of crap that had either just saved his life or killed them all. He wedged his free foot against one wall and his back against the other, then brought his injured leg up as far as he could. He gritted his teeth against the pain as he took hold of the lure and slowly pulled it away from his calf, until he could feel the small pimple of the barb pressing up from beneath his skin. He put the point of his gutting knife on the bump, angled it towards the wound, pressed down, and screamed. The skin parted, and the barbed hook slid up and out along the blade of his knife. Dirk screamed once more, for good measure. And, from deep inside the doomed ship, someone else screamed back.